Hey everyone. I wanted to clarify what I'm talking about when I'm talking about ego. I went and did a bit of research so that I could get perspective of what the general terminology through Wikipedia and that is, so that you guys can use that as a reference. Anyway, what I'm referring to when I talk about ego is the decision-making process that comes from either, um, well, basically I'll give you a quick rundown. You got the id, or ID, which is basically your primitive brain that apparently has some very chaotic um, thoughts come out from it that come into the ego, because the ego is the mediator. It's the connection between the external world and the internal world. The internal world being ID and superego, and basically it's the one that kind of handles the chaos in between your conscious part, your mental parts, and the external world, and the information coming in and out. Basically, the ID basically gives you id. Why do I keep going with ID? Id basically gives you the impulses like food, sex, fear, um, pleasure, and those things. And the superego is kind of referenced as the morality of yourself. Basically, it's kind of like it helps you make decisions by making you feel guilty if you're doing something that it believes is wrong. Now, when I'm talking about ego, I'm talking about going to superego a bit more first. Yeah, so superego is basically a collection of taught moralities as well as moralities you've come to discern yourself. So basically, from personal experiences, like if you have something bad happen to you, you then learn that morally it's wrong to do it to someone else because you know what it feels like, so you don't want to do it to someone else. So you feel guilty if you do. It's basically dominates your ego and stops you from doing something like uh, sleeping with your friend's girlfriend, kind of thing. Anyway, so when I am talking about ego, the ego is a minute. I'm talking about the actual process of thought that the ego is taking and giving to the superego or the id. And I believe that reacting to being aware of it, sometimes being aware of it, because not everyone is, being aware that your id is actually pushing you to do something out of fear and then actually continuing on with the action is what I'm talking about when I'm saying it's a bad part of the ego, something that you need to be aware of and actually stop. Because when I talk about sense of self and yourself and the real you, I'm talking about a kind of synchronization between superego and ego. And I've found that this does exist, though it's more of a material sense of self you've created. I'm not sure if it's an innate thing or not. It might be. For me, it always felt like it was. But I'm very aware that I have created that sense of self through my own imagination, creativity, moral aspects, and experiences of my own right and wrong. So I'm trying to, when I'm working on myself and my ego, I'm trying to get that synchronization of self to happen between the superego and the id, because they don't really get along a lot of the time. The id's usually referenced to chaos, and morality is usually referred to as morality. Superego is usually referred to morality, being that it's trying to be a perfectionist, it's trying to be perfect, and it's just trying to get satisfaction right there. I'm not saying that these are bad functioning parts. They're not at all. They are important parts of us. And I feel that what happens is society teaches us a lot of habits that go into both of these parts of the brain that cause a lot of frustration and conflict. And actually, I think this is kind of what Buddhism's trying to get at. They're trying to clear out all the habits and things we believe we have to do and teach ourselves to do, and remove them from yourself, which you can't really do because it's a habit. Once you learn to have it, you don't unlearn it. You just need to reinvent it into a more productive way. Like, for an example, the society taught me to be more compulsive and obsessive because I needed an escape from a lot of the pressures and the expectations that were constantly causing me anxiety. So that obsession nature, though I'm not sure if it's not innate or not, it could be. I've got a very strong ability to focus, so it could have just emphasized it and then developed into an obsessive tendency. Anyway, the obsessive tendency got stuck on computer games because it was something I was always good at and it's something I've always understood. That and technology in games is something I've always been pretty um, clever with. And so I actually retaught that habit to be more positive and more directed into a correct way. Kind of like if you're constantly repeating yourself and obsessing about bad things happening to you, you make them true. Like someone who's in depression usually is constantly reminding themselves that they have bad thoughts, and that is building up a bigger picture in the mind, making it stronger. And then these kind of experiences start to really sink into your id and your super ego, because your ego then justifies it to them and teaches them like it would probably justify it to the super ego by going, yeah, I feel terrible because I am a terrible person. And super ego would be go morally wise it would look for reasons why you were a terrible person, and then the ego would agree with it to make the super ego believe, because well, our subconscious is pretty damn gullible. Anyway, my point of my choices in life is to actually remove all the parts that are causing those two factions to not synchronize. Now, Sigmund Freud doesn't believe that these can ever really uh, coexist together, being superego and id. I don't believe this is so true. I haven't got any proof on this fact. This is a gut feeling, and this is something I'm willing to find out. If I find out that it never will actually exist, I'll be quite happy to be wrong because I've got my answer. But I'm going to go with that kind of thought process because that gives me something to follow. Now, I believe there is a synchronization between the two because there's times in my life and things I've achieved that have brought both kind of dominating feelings of existence that um, they just seemed perfect. Let's see. I'll give an example. When I lost my best friend to suicide quite a few years ago, well, not that long ago, I actually dealt with it a lot better than a lot of people around me. And for a little while, it was confusing. I just accepted it, that I got it really well. I was upset that my friend was dead. I knew it, and I was very annoyed. But I wasn't distraught as everyone else because it wasn't because I wasn't feeling it. I was feeling it. I was pretty upset about it. It was my best friend for 7 years. How could I not be? But I just I come to an understanding of accepting it, and during that time, my id and my super ego were completely in synchronization with each other because they knew what was happening and they agreed on how I handled it. My ego um, rationalized it, took any stories out of it. I didn't tell myself anything. I didn't go, he killed himself because of this, he did this because of that. I didn't do that. I just got really upset, mourned him, and relaxed and let it go. And it's sad that he's gone, but it's the way the world happens. It's kind of a bit like I like the Norse mythology. They got a very much a this is what happened. Let's move on and let's work out how to better ourselves from this. They're very good at that. They never really mourned over the friend's deaths. It was more of a understanding that it's now happened and that's that. It wasn't that they didn't feel it. It's just that it was an accepting period because we actually have romanticized grieving a bit too much in the Western culture to the point where we're meant to get so upset that we're distraught and causing chaos. How does that make sense? Alright, back to the superego and ego and id. Now, I hope I'm getting through to you guys with what I'm trying to explain because there's a lot of conceptions of ego and a lot of terminologies in it. I'm referring to the Sigmund Freud version when I talk about the ego, and I'm really referring to the actual thought process of what the ego does with thoughts and information. I am constantly bombarded by information, especially being neurotypical. I haven't got the filters to cut it out. So my egos has to work a lot, but yet it's still managed to really give a lot of good information to both sides of the superego and the id. And I believe that's why I'm more balanced in who I am and able to actually become in synchronization with my emotions, which is something very difficult for people with Asperger's. It's kind of annoying when we watch neurotypicals feel an emotion and they completely discard it. We have to work at it, and you guys take them for granted. It does actually upset me a little. I don't know if it upsets other people with Asperger's, but I wish I could do it that easy. Because even though I'm very logical and methodical and cognitive, you still lack you still feel the absence of desire, and it's still there. The emotions are there, but with the anxiety blocking the emotions that comes from not fitting in with everyone and society not being quite accessible or easy to synchronize with for us, the anxiety causes our emotions to be blocked because fear is more important than going through the motions of your emotions. And I think this is what blocks a lot of people from Asperger's actually reacting the way people think they should. And I think this is also the cause of a lot of our development difference. Like we actually had to develop to think clearly because you can think through anxiety, and that's why I think we develop other traits that hide us from being noticed. Frankly, I'm sick of hiding. I've been trying not to hide quite a lot lately, and I've been a bit more myself, a lot happier with it too. It took me a while, but it wasn't until the last 4 years that I actually finally worked that out and actually retaught myself how anxiety should come up and when it should come up. I've been talking to someone else who has Asperger's, and it's quite interesting what she has to say about these kind of things as well. And I see that a lot of things she has is going through something went through a couple of years back, and it's quite natural. I think you shouldn't shy away from experiences because experiences will teach you whether it's right or wrong for you. And well, we're going to find out. It's better than not knowing. I'd always prefer to know. I've always taken everything on the chin, and well, now I can honestly say I've taken control of my life for me. And you know what? I've not upset anyone by doing this. There's no one crying over it. There's no one scared of it. If anything, when I show this to the parents that I do talks for, I see the hope in their eyes for their kids, and that alone is enough for me to continue doing these talks and just bearing everything I've got. Because being vulnerable can be scary, but at the worst, the pain you receive from it will teach you a valuable lesson. Pain is not actually something to shy away from. You shouldn't look for it. That's not what I'm saying, but you should accept it, take it on board, and learn the lesson from it. Because how else are we going to survive? Because if we continue on being blind to our own existence and our own functionalities and our own abilities and our own beautiful amazingness, we're just going to crash and burn. And we're going to destroy this planet with us, which is frankly something that I find quite upsetting. I'm not a tree hugger. I don't need to be, but I love the animals, the birds, the trees, the sun, all of it. And I'm quite happy existing and being alive. So I think we should really be conscious of ourselves and what we keep telling ourselves because we do tell ourselves little stories. Oh, that reminds me. So the ego doesn't always tell honest things to the id or the superego. It manipulates the information